Look at the biggest, most expensive screen in your house right now. Maybe it is a massive 4K television in your living room. Maybe it is a sleek, ultra-thin OLED panel that cost you a month of rent. It feels like the absolute peak of modern technology. But the truth is, you are staring at a 100-year-old optical illusion. For a century, every major leap in entertainment technology has essentially been a lie. Back in the 1920 seconds, the first cathode ray tubes trapped light behind a thick wall of glass. Over the decades, we made that glass thinner. We made the box lighter. We packed millions of tiny glowing pixels so close together that your brain is tricked into seeing a high-definition image. But the fundamental physics of your television have not changed since your grandparents bought their first black and white set. You are still just sitting on a couch staring at a flat, two-dimensional wall, letting your eyes be tricked by trapped light. It is an evolutionary dead end. Right now, inside a laboratory in China, a team of engineers is operating a machine that proves the era of the flat screen is completely over. They have not built a better television, they have not built a thinner panel or a sharper pixel. They have built a true free-space volumetric display. In plain terms, they have built a real, physical-looking 3D hologram. This is not a parlor trick. It is not a reflection done with hidden projectors and a pane of glass, like the illusions you might see at a theme park or a Las Vegas concert. This is actual light, stopped and shaped in the open air, floating right in the middle of a room. You can walk entirely around it. You can view it from any angle without wearing a bulky virtual reality headset and without looking through a piece of glass. If you think holograms are just science fiction, you need to understand what is happening right now. Because if this technology works at a global scale, that expensive flat screen hanging on your wall is about to become as hopelessly outdated as a horse and buggy. We have spent the last 100 years trapped behind glass. The glass is about to shatter. For the last 10 years, the smartest engineers in Silicon Valley knew the flat screen was reaching its limit. Companies like Apple, Meta, and Google looked at the television and the smartphone and realized we were running out of ways to make a piece of glass exciting. Their solution was supposed to be the next major leap in human history. They spent tens of billions of dollars on it. But their solution was fundamentally flawed from the very beginning. They built virtual reality and augmented reality headsets. They took the flat screen, shrank it down to the size of a postage stamp, and strapped it directly to your face. If you look at devices like the Apple Vision Pro or the Meta Quest, they are undeniably brilliant pieces of engineering. They pack enormous computing power into a small space. But they do not solve the actual problem of the flat screen. They just hide it. Think about looking out a window at a mountain. A standard television is like looking through that window from across the room. A VR headset is like taking that same window and taping it directly to your eyeballs. No matter how close you get, you are still looking at a flat digital image being pushed into your optic nerve. You are not actually interacting with a physical object in the room. You are just wearing the window. And there is a much bigger problem. Headsets isolate you from reality. When you put a heavy piece of plastic and metal over your eyes, you leave the physical world behind. You cannot make eye contact with your spouse sitting on the same couch. You cannot easily share a physical object resting on a table. You are closed off, living inside a private, walled-off simulation. Silicon Valley has spent a fortune trying to convince American consumers that this blindfolded isolation is the inevitable future of entertainment and work. But it is not working. Buyers try these heavy headsets for a few weeks, get tired of the weight and the isolation, and leave them in a closet. Human beings simply do not want to be cut off from their own living rooms. True three-dimensional experience does not mean putting a screen closer to your eyes. It means bringing the digital object into the physical room with you. It means creating light that exists in the open air, exactly like a lamp or a chair. While American tech giants were spending fortunes trying to figure out how to make wearable screens lighter, a group of physicists halfway across the world decided to stop playing the game entirely. They asked a very simple question: what if we throw the glass away completely? To build a real hologram, you have to break a fundamental habit of engineering. For a century, television makers treated light as something you trap against a flat surface. The researchers in China realized that to move forward, they had to stop treating light like paint on a canvas and start treating it like clay in the physical world. They shifted their focus to a technology called a free-space volumetric display. To understand how radical this is, think about how a normal screen works. Your television is made up of millions of flat squares called pixels. When they change color, your eye is tricked into seeing a moving picture. But a volumetric display does not use pixels. It uses something called a voxel. A voxel is a three-dimensional pixel. It does not exist on a flat piece of glass. It exists at a specific physical coordinate, floating in the empty air. The problem with building a voxel has always been the basic nature of light. If you shine a flashlight into a dark room, the beam of light travels in a straight line until it hits a wall, a piece of dust, or your hand. Light does not just stop in the middle of the air and hover. It needs a physical surface to bounce off of so your eye can see it. That is why we have always needed screens. The screen is the surface that catches the light. To create a true hologram, you have to figure out a way to stop light in the middle of a room without a screen, without a wall, and without a headset. You have to give the light a physical anchor in thin air. This is exactly what the Chinese engineering teams have managed to do. They found a way to manipulate the air itself to catch the light. Instead of shining a projector at a piece of glass, they use invisible forces to create a tiny, microscopic physical point floating in the room. Then they hit that exact floating point with a laser. When the laser hits it, that tiny point lights up. It becomes a glowing voxel. If you create one voxel, you just have a tiny floating dot of light. But if you can create millions of these floating dots and arrange them perfectly in three-dimensional space, you do not just have a picture, you have a physical shape. You have a glowing, moving object sitting right in front of you on your coffee table. You can walk a full circle around it. If it is a rendering of an apple, you see the front of the apple from the couch and the back of the apple from the kitchen. It is physically occupying the space in your room. Saying they trapped light in midair sounds like magic. But it is not magic. It is incredibly precise physics. And the actual science of how they grab the air to make this happen is surprisingly simple once you understand the trick. How do you stop light in empty space? You do not. Instead, you give the light something to hit. The researchers use a technique involving invisible lasers and a single microscopic particle of matter. Think of a tiny speck of dust floating in a sunbeam inside your living room. Normally, gravity pulls that speck down, or a breeze blows it away. But engineers use focused invisible laser beams to trap that speck. The lasers push against the particle from different directions, acting like a pair of invisible tweezers. They hold the tiny particle perfectly still in the middle of the air. This is called an optical trap. Once the particle is trapped, they shoot it with a second set of red, green, and blue lasers. The speck lights up. It becomes a single glowing pixel hovering in your room. But one pixel is useless. Here is where the brilliant trick happens. Think about standing outside on the 4th of July, holding a glowing sparkler. If you hold your hand perfectly still, it is just a single dot of light. But if you spin your arm really fast in a circle, your eyes see a solid ring of fire glowing in the dark. Your brain connects the dots because the sparkler is moving faster than your eyes can process. The volumetric display does the exact same thing, but at speeds that are hard to comprehend. The invisible laser tweezers move that single glowing speck around the room millions of times per second. It flies through the air, tracing the outline of a spinning car, a human face, or a football hovering over your table. Because the particle is moving incredibly fast and human eyes are relatively slow, you do not see a single dot zooming around. Your brain blends it all together. You see a solid, glowing, three-dimensional shape standing completely still in the open air. Some laboratories are even doing this without the speck of dust. They use highly focused lasers to literally zap a microscopic point of air for a fraction of a second, creating a tiny spark of glowing plasma. Then they draw shapes with that spark. It is just light, speed, and timing. There is no magic glass, no mirror trick, and no bulky headset. They have turned the empty air inside a room into a screen. The physics are proven, the machines are real, the laboratory phase is succeeding. And that brings us to the real problem. Because when a piece of science fiction becomes an engineering reality, the companies that built their empires on the old technology have to face a terrifying truth. Think about the most valuable companies on the planet right now. Apple, Samsung, LG, Google. Their entire empires are built on a single fragile foundation, the flat screen. Apple is a multi-trillion-dollar company, primarily because it sells you expensive pieces of glass that you put in your pocket, sit on your desk, or strap to your wrist. Samsung makes billions manufacturing the actual display panels that go inside those devices and the televisions in your home. The global tech economy is a massive supply chain dedicated to cutting, polishing, and shipping flat glass. But what happens to that supply chain when the glass is no longer necessary? If free space volumetric displays replace traditional screens, the business models of these American and South Korean giants will face a devastating threat. Imagine the next version of a smartphone. It might not be a flat rectangle at all. It could just be a small, durable cylinder that you carry in your pocket. When you want to watch a video or take a video call, you set it on a table, and the image projects directly into the air in front of you. There is no screen to crack. There is no heavy glass panel to manufacture. If China holds the foundational patents and the manufacturing capability for this new technology, the balance of global tech power shifts overnight. Whoever controls the hardware for the next human interface will control the next century of consumer electronics. Right now, American companies are desperately trying to defend the era of screens. That is exactly why Apple and Meta are pouring billions of dollars into virtual reality headsets. They are trying to keep you looking at glass panels, even if they have to strap them to your face. They are defending their existing supply chains. Meanwhile, Chinese engineers are actively building the post-glass era. They are not trying to sell you a heavier screen, they are trying to make the screen completely obsolete. If they succeed, the American tech industry will be caught totally off guard, stuck, holding warehouses full of outdated headsets while the rest of the world moves on to free space holograms. Think about the ripple effects across the United States economy. It is not just Apple and Meta that would suffer. Think of Corning, the American company that makes Gorilla Glass for almost every smartphone. Think of the thousands of software developers who design apps specifically for flat, two-dimensional swiping. A shift to true 3D interfaces means every operating system and every piece of hardware has to be completely redesigned from the ground up. The strategic stakes are massive. But before you throw your television in the trash, there is something you need to know. Moving from a brilliant breakthrough in a controlled laboratory to a consumer product you can actually buy at Best Buy is never a simple process. It is important to be completely honest about where this technology stands right now. What the engineering teams in China have built is a laboratory breakthrough, not a finished consumer product. You cannot go online and order a free space volumetric display for your living room today. To understand why, you have to look at the sheer amount of power this machine requires. Remember the microscopic particle moving millions of times a second to draw a physical shape in the air. Tracking and pushing that tiny speck requires incredibly complex algorithms. The invisible lasers have to adjust their focus instantly. If the timing is off by even a fraction of a millisecond, the illusion falls apart and the hologram simply disappears. Running those precise calculations requires massive computing power. Right now, the hardware needed to process that math is bulky. The lasers require serious electricity. The cooling systems needed to keep the equipment from melting are loud. If you look at the current prototypes, they are not sleek little devices. They look like heavy industrial machinery, surrounded by thick cables and humming servers. But this is exactly how every major technological shift begins. Think back to the 1960 seconds. The first computers were the size of entire rooms. They required massive air conditioning units to stay cool. They cost millions of dollars, and they were only used by top government scientists and military engineers. Nobody looked at those giant, loud machines and thought they would one day shrink down to fit inside a pocket. But they did. The first mobile phones were the size of a brick and cost thousands of dollars. The first flat-screen televisions were heavy, incredibly expensive, and prone to breaking. Technology always starts loud, expensive, and clunky. Then engineers go to work. Over the next decade, the processors will get faster. The lasers will shrink. The power requirements will drop. The massive cooling fans will be replaced by silent thermal management. The wall between this laboratory breakthrough and your living room has not disappeared. It has just been moved a few years down the calendar. The hardest part, the basic physics of trapping light in empty space, has already been solved. It is only a matter of time before these machines are small enough and cheap enough to manufacture at a global scale. And when that day arrives, your house will never be the same. Imagine walking into your living room 10 years from now. You sit down on your couch, but you do not point a remote at a giant black rectangle on the wall. Instead, a small device on your coffee table quietly powers on. You want to watch a professional football game. Suddenly, a miniature field materializes in the empty air right in front of you. The players are physically glowing in three-dimensional space. If you want to see a controversial catch, you do not wait for a television producer to change camera angles. You simply lean forward and look around the defender yourself. You are observing the actual volume of the game happening in real time, right inside your house. Think about how you communicate today. Taking a video call means staring at a flat, awkward grid of faces on a computer monitor. With a volumetric display, the person you are talking to simply appears in the chair across from you. You can read their actual physical body language. You can make real eye contact. The distance between cities completely vanishes. The impact goes far beyond simple entertainment. Imagine a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Instead of looking at a flat X-ray on a monitor, A perfect beating hologram of the patient's heart hovers over a desk. The doctor can walk entirely around it, spotting physical problems that a flat image would hide. Imagine an American auto engineer shaping a new car design with their bare hands in the middle of a conference room. For the last 100 years, human interior design has been dictated by the screen. We arrange all of our furniture to point at a wall. When the television is turned off, it is just a massive, dead black mirror dominating the room. It is a giant, heavy piece of glass that does absolutely nothing. This Chinese volumetric display breakthrough threatens to finally kill that black mirror. We are standing at the absolute end of the glass era. Since the 1920 seconds, our relationship with digital reality has been trapped behind a barrier. We look through the window, but we cannot reach inside. Now the window is being removed. The digital world is spilling out into the physical world. It is exactly like watching the transition from the telegraph to the telephone. One technology forced you to decode flat signals. The other let you hear a real human voice. We are about to cross that exact same bridge, but for human vision. The companies that realize this first will own the next century. The companies that keep building flat screens will quietly disappear. The flat screen in your living room has had a great run, but technology rarely stands perfectly still. It evolves, and the old kings are eventually replaced by something that once sounded completely impossible. The shift from trapped light behind a glass panel to true free space volumetric holograms is not just a neat trick. It is a fundamental disruption of a trillion-dollar global industry. So, here is a question for you. If a consumer version of this Chinese hologram machine arrived at an American electronics store tomorrow, would you finally throw your flat-screen television in the trash? Or are you too attached to staring at the glass? Let me know your answer down in the comments.